All right, I'd like to call to order the February 21st, 2022 working session for the Perry Township Board of Trustees at 10 a.m. Please call the order.
Trustee Hartshorn,
Yes.
trustee Mears,
Yes.
trustee Music.
Yes.
All right, our first topic is discussion of the potential usage of the American Rescue Plans Act funding that we've received so far. Okay, so we've got the numbers have been run for the police department as well as for our
Non-police.
non-police department
Correct.
personnel. And you've laid it out with what the impact is based on the hours worked for those 2 years, based on a range of amounts per hour. And I believe, what did you say that some of the local townships?
Okay, so Clay paid across the board $2.50 per hour on premium pay. That was for police and non-police.
Right.
I know that I talked with trustee Mears about it off and on. We kind of talked about it a little bit this morning, kind of ran some numbers. If we should look at doing $2.50 on the police side and potentially $2 for the non-police, because as trustee Mears and I talked about it, I think honestly, if you think about it, the police probably deserve a little bit more because they had a lot more exposure.
They did.
They had a lot more relying on them. If we went with the $2.50 per hour for the police and $2 an hour for the non-police, factoring in also the 14% OPERS employer liability, we're looking at a cost of, it was just under $46,000. And that would be funded from part of the ARP funds.
Say that amount again.
It was 46,000.
That was if you did 2 for non.
2 for non and $2.50 for police, plus the 14%
Okay.
OPERS employer liability.
14%, yes.
Yeah.
So I would disagree that non-police were any less important to receive the same amount as what police would. They were considered just as essential
Mhm.
as the police. And I think if we're going to do anything, it needs to be the same across.
Across the board. I mean, that was just one of the things that trustee Mears and I had talked about a little bit and just kind of looking at.
I don't think, didn't Clay adjust they didn't give them, they might have given the $2.50, but I don't know if they'd given the same amount of time.
Mhm.
The time-
It did. It was the same across the board. It was just distinguished differently between non-police and police. They had to separate them out. So if we do $2.50 across the board. 3 plus. 42. Times 14%. Six, 18. Okay, so you're looking at about 48,000. Doing it $2.50 straight across the board. And that does add in the 14% OPERS.
These folks worked because they were deemed essential.
Mhm.
That's it. No one was
Yep.
more essential than the next. We all worked through the pandemic the same.
Right.
So
See a case for both. I mean, honestly, the roads and cemeteries didn't have the level of immediate exposure. They weren't interacting with people. I could see Karen being a little bit closer to what the police got because she did have that interaction when people come in to pay their bills and stuff like that.
How many burials did our roads and maintenance have to deal with? You know,
Well, it,
pallbearers and,
it depends on which way you have to look at because like Caleb just started in July of 2021.
right,
So the number that his number would have been a lot lower on that one. And then, of course, we had Dave Steffi, and for the most part of that time, he was part-time through the time frame.
I mean, if you made that argument, you could say, well, let's take the number of traffic stops each officer had and pay them accordingly.
And that's very true.
Mhm.
So to be clear, I don't have a problem with paying everybody the 250. I think it makes it cleaner, easier to deal with overall. I'm also playing devil's advocate because we have the first stipend, which was the first one, it was like 174,
Mhm.
right? We took what, 25% off that, set it aside for IT and stuff because we had no real
Correct.
IT infrastructure.
Correct.
And then we have this, and then whatever's left from this, from the first stipend, because there is a second stipend that's gonna come.
Right.
We know it's supposed to be later this year, like somewhere around the end of the fiscal year.
Do we have a
maybe.
total on that?
It's the same exact amount.
It's the same amount.
170.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So I guess what we're looking at using the ARPA funds for is part of the conversation we should be having right now.
Mhm.
Because I don't have a problem with paying everybody the 250 across the board. I think they earned it. They did a fantastic job during this time. I just want to also make sure that there's a few things that we need, and because of the changes to how the ARPA funds can be spent.
Right. It opens up our opportunities.
That alleviates some of our burden on stuff that we have no idea how we were going to get otherwise,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Whether it's a dump truck for the roads, whether it's looking into any number of improvements that we've discussed from time to time. So,
You said we took 25% of that first out,
Yes.
correct?
yes, just set it aside.
Yeah.
So the difference between the two different values and doing everybody at 250 is only about $2,000 anyhow.
Correct.
So I don't think that's gonna hurt us.
Right.
I think that if we do everybody at 250, to be honest, it's a low number of people. I was expecting a longer list
I
than
did
this,
too.
but we have had a lot of turnover in the police department. with-
Right. And that was one of the things we did get clarification at conference. There was a legal group that came in, which I'm going to be bringing up here shortly as well. But there was a legal group that came in and we verified with them because there was some questions, who do you pay the premium pay to? And they point blank said, if they are no longer an employee, you can't pay them premium pay.
Right.
Because it just opens everything back up again. They become classified an employee.
Yeah.
You have to do all of the tax stuff. Yes. So that was their clarification, was that if they are no longer here, they no longer qualify for it.
So let's put a pin in this just for a few minutes
Okay.
and talk for a couple minutes about, let's be very direct in what we're planning to use the ARPA funds for.
So one more thing,
Yeah.
before we start that, we did already allocate 50,000 of ARPA towards a new truck, is that correct?
No,
Is that from that
that was previously.
previous?
Right,
Yes.
that was township funds.
Okay,
We would set 50,000 aside. The
Okay.
problem was that we couldn't find one for
right,
the amount of money we had allocated.
right, okay,
Now, the thing with that is that 50, since it has pretty much already been allocated, that 50 still has to
Right.
stay there.
Yes.
We could potentially use some of this to add funds
To that.
because of the
Right.
increased cost of everything with the way everything is. That is an acceptable expense.
so if we allocated the 50, and let's say we get one for 25,
Mhm.
what happens to that 25 that's left over?
It has to come back to the Board of Trustees, so they have to vote to
Reappropriate.
reappropriate it, and then it has to be filed with the county before we can do anything.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Right, but, and let's also be practical. If we could find a dump truck for 25,000, it's probably not a dump truck we want. I think the dump trucks that we have, even though they're rusted out, falling
We paid
apart,
17,000.
have been maintained, right?
Right.
I just would offset that.
Right.
So
That's fine.
that, I just wanted, for everybody listening at a later date, I want them to
I
understand.
use
that-
25 as easy numbers. 25 is half.
And I
That was it.
appreciate the exercise.
That was it.
I wanted people to understand that, man, if we could get one for 25,
We
we
would-
probably.
we're done. Yeah,
So-
no, I get you.
Okay, so with the ARPA funds, we have, and I don't have the exact number. in-
282,500 would be if we take out the 48,000 and the 43,500 we allocated with the 25% the first time.
Right.
That leaves us with, 82,500 remaining out of the first 174,000. And with the second 174, that would give us 256,500.
Okay. So I would like to hear a little bit more about what you were saying about talking with the legal team at OTA.
Mhm. Okay, so, and several other townships are doing this. I've been working with numerous fiscal officers. And I talked over the weekend with, Georgiana Godsey, which, I was kind of asking her, throwing some ideas off of her because they did come down with the resolution through the OTA of something that could be used to help move some of those funds. But the way that it's stipulated in that resolution, you have to identify the project and then you have to identify the maximum amount of funds. So they're still working out the language to actually just move the funds under the lost revenue. They don't have anything specific for it. Georgiana said that they have actually contracted with this legal firm that did the presentation, the Baker Legal Firm at OTA. They have reached an agreement with OTA that as long as you are an OTA member, they are offering discounted rates for their services. But what they do is they'll answer questions you have of what is an acceptable expense. And they will even provide resolution language to make sure that you stay in compliance and everything's in there that needs to be in there for the use of the funds. I've reached out to them. I'm waiting to hear back from them what their cost is associated with that, but that cost can also be paid out of the ARP fund, so it doesn't come out of the township's budget. The benefit to that is I'm running into obstacles right now where when I contact our legal counsel, which is what they advise, contact your legal counsel, I'm getting a lot of, well, we really don't know whether that's acceptable or not.
And that's the prosecutor's office.
Right.
basically.
Yes, that's the prosecutor, which I understand,
because
that's not their whole wheelhouse.
If a precedent isn't set, they have no legal footing to say, this is
Right.
on this side, this is on this side.
Right.
So,
But this law firm has a unit that's specifically designed to address ARP funds and what they can and cannot be used for.
And OTA contracted them, right?
Yes, OTA has an agreement with them.
and them basically giving them the stamp of approval
Mhm.
does give a bit of comfort,
Yes, it
and
does.
I'm sure that they follow on to defend any issues that arise out
Correct.
of their legal advice and anything else. So it's, I mean,
hope so.
that's a win-win.
Right.
Definitely.
So I mean, I think waiting to hear back what they come back with, and with it being a holiday, I don't know that I'll hear anything from them today. I just think that it might be something we might consider, moving forward, just so that we make sure we've got all of our bases covered.
Well,
For the
we
uses.
do know that we always want to make sure that we're on the right side of things as they evolve.
Right.
And I've had very similar conversations with the prosecutor's office. And I've run into the same experience that it's not. There's not enough precedent, there's not enough challenge to what you can and can't do. And without that, that's kind of how they're built to
Mhm.
speak on whether you can or can't. So I think that would be a great idea, to find out what their costs run and look it over and say, because anytime we make a decision, we want to make as informed a decision as we can. And that means making sure that we have the right people that we're listening to and that can answer our questions and help us make it through. I think that would be a good use of the funds, because this is a sizable amount. Especially for our township, and to make sure that we're doing the right things with it and making sure that the township is seeing that benefit.
Yes.
I think that it would be our due diligence to follow through with that. So we don't need a decision or anything on that, just
Right.
keep chasing that and
Right.
and figure out, what they're saying, and then we can discuss it at a later meeting. So that said, if we out of the first stipend, what do we see as possible uses that we could do? I know we've got the dump truck percentage, probably like, I don't know, 35-40% of what a cost would be. Possibly if we just earmark that off to the side, because I know when Caleb was looking around for trucks, and I had done some poking too on like Gov Deals and other places that are selling. Can't really find a gently used truck. That doesn't happen,
Right.
but the price is. If we don't want something that we're gonna have to flip around and buy something new in 5 years anyhow, it's gonna be on the higher side of 80. Unless we get lucky and we work a deal with like a Miami Township or a local township that has a lot of funds that is looking to rotate a vehicle out after a couple of years and offers us.
Well, Clay Township's getting ready to put theirs on Gov still, but theirs is got some issues too, so I.
Right,
think that
and
would be-
that's the thing is if you buy a vehicle for less, you also have to look at how old it is.
Right.
How hard it's been run.
Right.
And figure out what percentage of money you want to set aside for maintenance of that over the next couple of years, because with the roads, we do have money coming in, with cemeteries, not so much. But we're kind of at a trickle of what comes in from that line of financing. So a cheaper vehicle could have a higher end of on the maintenance side versus something that could get us by for a handful of years with standard maintenance, and then start paying more out in the following years. So you had mentioned that there was, with the way that we're able to now move the ARPA funds into the general fund for disbursement throughout the different funding lines. Was there something that was said in there regarding building repairs, building improvements, building replacements?
Well, that was the thing that they were talking about, like somebody brought up that they're in the process of, they were getting ready to build a new salt barn.
Right.
And that was one of the things that isn't an allowable expense to do that.
Is not.
It is. It is. They even said, come down to the fact that, a maintenance building, if you needed a new maintenance building, these funds can be used to that. These funds can even be used to fill that new building.
Right.
Equipment, anything necessary, tools, that kind of stuff, you can use these funds for. Which kind of brings me back to another thing that I needed to talk with you guys about. Was, I know in the last trustees meeting, Chief presented the receipts from the upgrades that were done here to put the generator in. And I know Caleb had talked about the possibility of doing something like that out the maintenance garage.
Right.
I actually will have to have a resolution and to set up the account code, plus a resolution to appropriate funds to that account code to pay those bills out of. Because see, currently all we have to pay bills from the ARP funds is the salary and the IT. So that's another thing that we'll need.
Salary, that's a portion of Karen's salary.
Yes.
So as an administrative person to help with the documentation that we had to get done,
Mhm.
I don't know how familiar you were with what we did with that and everything else.
Yeah.
Part of her going full-time was that she would help with the
Oh, yes.
ARPA documentation.
Correct, because
Right,
that was
so-
part of the ARPA fund requirement that we had to have someone.
Yes.
Yeah,
you had to have
okay,
someone
yes, I
that
remember
do
that.
work. So.
Yes. And now, that doesn't make her job time stamped, correct? Once it's done, she's no longer gonna be full-time. That wasn't a stipulation, correct?
Well, so the ARPA funds basically run through the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Currently, and they could extend it further if they need
Okay.
to.
Right.
So it's
Just play that.
kind of open-ended.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't designed necessarily though to be a permanent
Right.
increase to full-time.
Okay.
Unless something at the time that we're through this process, there's something that substantiates us keeping her full-time and we have the available resources to do that.
I'm just making sure that my running tally of kind of put money into little.
Do you want me to go pull? I have the resolutions of exactly what we put aside into where.
Yeah.
I'll go grab those.
Yeah, that would be useful. Because luckily, I mean, with the CARES Act, it was very rigid as to what you could spend and what you couldn't. And people asked why we didn't take any CARES Act funds.
Right.
We really didn't do anything.
No.
We had the plexiglass out front.
Mhm.
Our offices, went into more of a restricted operations. The police had their own PPE. I mean, we were good. Then what? A year after CARES Act came out, then they started saying, wow, there's not a lot of people spending the CARES Act money. Well, what are we gonna do? So they started loosening it up a little bit. Well, when they did the ARP funds, they completely opened it up to fill the gap of the reaction to the pandemic, right? So supply chain costs increasing across the board for vehicles, upkeep of just about everything. So this time around, we wanted to make sure that without a shadow of a doubt that we were up there to make sure that we got what we needed, because just like everybody else, we've felt it.
Sure.
Whether it's from a tax perspective, the gas we pay for on a monthly basis for the police has gone up.
So
quite a bit.
I know that recently heard, and I haven't been able to find it, there was legislation passed that if you are working from home, that is now considered your area, that's where you're going to be taxed from. So if your office is somewhere else, you're no longer, and you don't go to a physical office location
Right.
in another city. If you're working from the township, that
Interesting.
changes. So, but I haven't narrowed down which bill that was.
Yeah, because they still tax my company
Correct.
and tax me based on, well, and I guess that's a difference in my career field, because I can work from anywhere.
Right.
So there's no tether as to where I physically have to be.
Mhm.
But for people that traditionally were button seats,
Mhm.
that is an interesting perspective, because they were pushed ahead 20 years to start teleworking and embracing
Yes.
technology in their day-to-day, so.
Right, and actually, we set aside 25% for salaries and 10% aside for the IT
It was
infrastructure.
10%, right?
Yes,
Okay, my numbers are off then. $10% for IT.
yes.
1740.
So, and our total receipt was 1,076, 348.41,
1,076.
348.41. Which after the 35% left us at 114,626.47,
Say that one more time, Charity.
114,626.47. And then if we take away the 47,930.31, which is what we calculated on the $2.50 premium, it leaves us with 66,696.16.
And that's just after the first batch.
Mhm.
Yes. And then if you add it back in, if you take that and add what our second tranche will be,
Is that gonna be the same 176?
176, 348.41. It gives us $243,044.57.
You said 243.
$243,44.57.
Good. So I guess my question is, moving forward with that money, what does our overall budget look like for the year? And what projects were already slated for 2022? So if we're gonna use this money, do we do extra? Do we cover what we already had planned on doing?
Do that.
We can't use any of this for anything. Well, as far as I know, we don't have anything earmarked for this
Right.
year, correct?
The way they explained it up there, if you started any project, you can't use the money on that.
We haven't started
Right.
anything yet for 2022.
Right. So that's how, because there was a couple people, that, well, we already started this building. No, you can't use that money. But since we have not got anything,
And that's where it came in, that they couldn't use the money for the building, but they could use the money to fill the building.
yes,
Well, no projects have started for 2022. so
Right. I know that we are,
2022 and what were we looking at doing? Obviously, that's part of the meeting here today is what are we looking to do forward?
there is one project that we had been working on, which I'm not sure where that's at, because I've not heard anything back from Kramer and Kramer yet. Remember, we did agree to do the one road
That
project.
was the OPWC one.
Yes.
Yeah, that was approved, but I haven't seen the stuff. come
I say I haven't gotten
OPWC
anything
yet.
back yet. so.
Which road was that? Was it
Amity,
Amity?
not all of
So we're
Amity.
just-
Or is it Amity or Providence?
No, it
I
was
think it was Amity,
Amity.
where they stopped and started two projects. We're gonna fix the middle between there.
I think so. There's a section down there. He was gonna.
Yeah, it was a section of Providence that we only have a small section that we're
Yeah,
responsible
on
for.
Providence is just
Yeah.
on the kill over.
Yeah.
But so that's Amity.
Well, one of them we opted not to do.
That was
That
the
was Steck Road.
stack.
Yes.
Stack.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what was did we get, obviously that cost is probably out the window at this point. Did we get a quote on that at all to widen?
I think that was one of those that we just had to start the process
Yeah.
with them before they went any further, because we had to go through Kramer and Kramer. If we're not interested, then they're not going to go through the process of collecting the totals and stuff, because.
So we could go back to them and say, we're looking at this as a
Mhm.
project that we would deal with.
And that was one of the other things that they said that we could use another acceptable use of the funds is to do road work.
Right, yeah. The catch is making sure that we have the labor available. That was one of the other things with the OPWC stuff, was that with the OPWC stuff and the Wolf Creek watershed stuff,
Mhm.
we weren't sure that we would have the manpower to deal with 3 projects in 1 year with the funerals, with the roads, with everything else that was going on. So that would be something we would have to circle back on, but we could definitely put something, talk with Caleb, figure out, if we earmark this for late summer, would this be something that would be able to be done? Get with Kramer and Kramer, talk with them about, speccing out the project, figuring out what it would run, and then figuring out what we could pay to do that. But I will tell you, I'm pretty sure that'll run over 150 for like Stack Road.
Oh, heavens, yes.
So,
Well, and I don't know that we can do Stuck Road at this point, not for this year. Because everything that we had to do with Kramer, we had to submit to them. Otherwise, it pushes it to next calendar year.
That's fine, as long as we're working on a plan.
well, and that's where I would probably ask them for some clarification, because that may have been for this year's OPWC, because that had a deadline to submit it.
Right.
But if we're not taking it through OPWC and we're looking to basically have this
Have it done on our own.
between us and them, then that would be different.
Okay.
My only caution there is that
Right.
doing road improvement is a costly endeavor,
Very
Right.
and
That road desperately needs done.
it does.
Probably our worst road.
Stack Road.
Yeah,
Stack's bad, Thorn Apple's bad.
Thorn Apple's bad.
I'm trying to think
Providence
of,
is bad
yeah,
down there in that dip.
the little short roads
Yeah.
are the ones that really,
And see, on that one, I think we should get the park involved and have them pay half of that, because most of the people that use that road are going to that park.
yeah,
Any houses in that road during that section? One?
not anymore. They tore it down.
Right
State
behind the
house?
cemetery.
No, right behind this,
Oh, the one behind the
Yes.
cemetery. Yeah. The other one, I was surprised last year when they tore it down. I was like, they finally tore it down. They didn't tell anybody, so I don't know how far I missed it by. Okay. So that's something we can look into, seeing what the cost of something like a Steck Road
Mhm.
or let's be honest, repaving the cemeteries or regraveling the cemeteries. We have 2 cemeteries that are well paved. We have one of them, or So. What is that?
Eversole.
Eversol, it was on the tip of my tongue. Eversol is mostly gravel.
Yes,
Around the whole thing. Piermont is gravel with a little pavement,
Yeah.
and then Pleasant Hill is pavement. It is, and it's, I mean, let's be honest, between the weather, the sheer traffic that goes through there. That's something else we have to look into. I mean, it's been something that's been dealing with two of the cemeteries would be relatively easy from a gravel perspective. They just have to be re-cleared and have the gravel relayed. But Pleasant Hill needs to be completely repaved. And then our fun project of the archway.
yes.
Right.
We do have a couple companies quoting those jobs right now.
You got what?
I guess Caleb, I talked to Caleb, he said he has talked to a couple companies that are quoting those
Okay,
jobs.
good.
So,
And
bidding those jobs.
Yeah, if we're talking about that stuff, I would like to see like stuff over there at the township or the building, the maintenance building, like the mold, new doors, things like that.
So that's part of the conversation that, as we were saying, straddles the two topics that we have today. So let's get into that.
Okay.
The maintenance building. We have to evaluate whether we're putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound, because the building is cracking, the roof is a mess, there's issues between the multiple additions that have been made to that building and the core building itself. So any major project, I know Caleb wanted to do the reframing of the back office because that was a mess, granted. But even a $9,000 project for materials, is that too much? We kind of put the stop on that because do we want to fix something that we're going to get rid of? And how soon will we be getting rid of it? So we never delved into that conversation of looking at the township infrastructure. This building has its problems. They're going to magnify as the years go by. We're already paying for a number of things, and we've got a number of issues in the spring we have to look at: the roof, the attic area, the heating issues. Our police department has outgrown their small closet that they're forced into. I think a lot of this comes back to the conversation about, is this the time to start talking about a single new building for the township? One that has the maintenance, has the police, and has the township administrative offices in a single location. To where we could actually budget for 20 years of what standard maintenance would be for that. Making sure that it has the ability to have backup power. It has the ability to hold people who have been arrested, keep evidence on site securely, temperature controlled, have a records retention room that actually makes sense, is well kept, is easily searched, there's a lot of stuff that this township has right now that has kind of been cobbled together on an as needed basis. And that's troubling. Mostly like the evidence storage out at the old maintenance building. All it takes is one piece of critical evidence to get moldy or start to fade.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a chain reaction to it. Not being able to hold someone or interview someone. The police have a number of issues with how they're operating, how they're forced to operate within the constraints of the township's buildings. Right. So that's something worth talking about broader than just the ARPA funds. The ARPA funds could seed that a little bit to start that process, but it's a larger conversation. What exactly does the township need? A more efficient building? A single building? Multiple buildings? What makes the most sense? Do you want to do something like solar? Do you want to do something like, I don't know, something with the leach fields? Do you want to do geothermal? I'm not trying to be flippant about it. What I'm saying is that
There's a million options we can.
planning for the future
What's
is
best
a
for the
very broad
township.
conversation,
Yes.
depending on what you want that future to include,
Yes.
right? I know some of the residents have said, well, you know, this is a historical building. I'm sorry, it's not. I think trustee Mears made the comment that, you know, well, hey, we could put it up for sale.
Yeah.
Someone could buy it.
Mhm.
It's been a schoolhouse, a maintenance garage.
There was garage doors right here.
Yes.
Trucks got worked on it.
And, you know, to me, that makes sense. You just don't know what you would get out of it, but anything you did get would go towards backfilling any funds spent on a new facility. So the other thing, just really quick, is the fact that this township had a very small police department of a couple officers just 3 years ago. Couple actives, a couple part-time. And the people in the township said they wanted a 24/7 police force. They made it known through the vote. They voted for the levy. We've established that. And that, but are we all the way there yet? No. We still have constraints, whether it's competitive salaries, being able to hold, you know, keep people employed versus them going elsewhere for a modest salary bump that we just can't meet. But they've outgrown that space. So that's another part of this is this kind of straddles from the ARPA funds to the future planning into the police levy is what does that look like? Do we need a separate location for them? Or does it make sense to put everything under one big roof? Possibly.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to leave the floor open and please, let's hear your thoughts. First.
Well, on the maintenance building, I think it's got good bones. I don't think it's ready to be tore down.
Right.
You know,
I agree.
to me, it's a solid building. There's things that need fixed. It needs upkept, just like you need to upkeep your house. So that's what I'm saying. About the building.
So I was out there last week, looked at the progress Caleb did make with mold mitigation to get all that out of there. And we discussed kind of the bones of the building.
Yeah.
And it was his opinion too, that the building has,
Yeah.
it's a solid building.
Yeah.
Now, will it need a roof in a couple of years? Sure, it probably will.
I don't
That's
know.
all.
I've been up there.
That's a whole lot cheaper than tearing it down and building a new building.
Yes.
As far as, you know, the water that's in it that caused the mold, I don't believe is necessarily anything wrong with the building. It's the water that comes off the salt of the trucks, the snow that's packed in.
It doesn't go
that-
down the floor drain.
that can't get to the floor drains. So there's a plan there to make that water go where it needs to go. And Caleb's got I think it'll work. He explained it all to me and kind of the layout that he wants to go. Even if we were to build a newer building, let's see. If we kept the maintenance building and built a new police department, I don't see any reason with not moving forward with Caleb's project. It's going to be 3 years, I'm sure, before 2 years
Right.
at limited before we build anything.
Anything.
And I don't see any reason to halt any kind of improvements out there with the opinion of the building is good enough to keep. And that's kind of just my opinion on that. And what I'll say, I guess, about the police department, this building, and it all comes down to funding. Can we afford to keep it? I don't know that we can. This is the best spot in the township for a police department. It is directly centrally located in the township, right smack in the center. I hate to see it, to give it up, to move it there. But I understand we can't afford both buildings.
So one of the things that you would have to look at is, without going into extravagant wants, purely talking about needs, core bone infrastructure. One of the things that's been mentioned is having an indoor garage area to pull the police vehicles. whether it's for maintenance, whether it's for securing them,
Mhm.
whatever. I'll be honest, this location doesn't have that space.
Mm-mm.
As soon as you start talking about that, I mean,
It's true.
and we'll be honest, I don't know how long these leach fields have. How they've been maintained, what the records are on them, don't know. That collapses, that's a huge issue.
Mhm.
So just from a police perspective, what is it that they need? Well, talking with, when Sergeant Hessler was here, they did, I don't know if you ever saw he did a CAD program of just a
Yeah.
a very simple floor
I've seen that.
layout,
Yep.
trying to take what they needed
Mhm.
so that we could have the discussion on the realm of the possible. They had interview areas,
Mhm.
they had an armory, they had an evidence room, they had a holding area, they had I think 3 offices, one for the sergeants, one for the chief, and one for someone later to be named. I know they've talked about having possibly a major or lieutenant or someone along those lines. But like 3 of those, and then those would all be in a protected area of the building.
Mhm.
So you would come into the building, there would be, and this is just an example that was mocked up. You would come into the building and there would be an entryway for the administrative offices. And that would split into, there would be like it would turn towards a police front desk. And then it would come back into like a meeting room area that would have its own bathrooms and stuff, with bathrooms throughout the building, showers. That's another thing that the police don't have here, is the ability to shower after very long shifts or after when they're
An
working
incident.
something, an incident, right?
Yeah.
And some people may say, well, showers, that's kind of a nice thing to have.
No, it's
No,
not.
if you've ever
It's not.
worked where you're
Yeah.
literally have no idea how you're standing up because your emotions have run high, it's been a long day, everything's been going on, and you have to go back.
Well, just on a communicable disease level,
Yes.
dealing with somebody else's bodily fluids, you need to shower that off. You don't need to take that home to your families.
So,
Well, or case in point, being on a homicide scene.
and that's my point, right? Where they're tracking an individual, they're working a major accident, there's been a homicide, there's been a standoff due to a drug enforcement arrest. I mean, we've seen all of these in the last couple of years. So this isn't a stretch of the imagination. The tornadoes were another one where we had issues with power. We had issues with basic operations. We've evolved at least past that. We have, the tactical unit van, the evidence van, whatever, that gives them the ability to recharge radios, to carry ammunition, to be able to secure evidence, to ensure the chain of custody is intact. That kind of came out of the tornadoes, because as stuff was happening, all we could do was react. So that vehicle was originally supposed to be a sergeant's vehicle. And they decided, you know what, we kind of need this purpose first. Sergeants can use it, but let's make sure that our core infrastructure is served. So a lot of stuff with that mock-up kind of highlighted what did the police force need? And then off to the other side of it, they had, you had the meeting room area that had its own exits and entrance with its own bathrooms that were walled off from any other area of the building. There was areas for the trustees, fiscal officer, zoning, as well as some, we'll call it common space.
Yes.
Yeah.
The police area had its own common space because, their area is a controlled area. But there was also like a break room / kitchenette kind of a thing. And
There was also a community area, correct? Community, this room was much larger
yes.
than what?
Yeah, and that was the other thing is that, I know when I was first elected, I went through the cabinets out here and I just started reading. I took like 2 whole days for like 9 hours a day. I would come up here and I would pull out a stack and I would start reading. There was I think it was back in the early 2000s, they tried to they put together a packet to build a senior center. Okay. And it was out the same program that we were able to get our ramps through. Okay. And they got all the way up to the end of the process and it stopped. I don't know if they had to get more information and provide it, they didn't provide it, whatever, basically the project just died on the vine.
Mhm.
And I realized that there's a lot of times that if something's available, people will use it. We only have, I think, one, the Cattlemen Club
Yes.
here,
Horseman,
and the horsemen?
yes.
Okay, they're not cattlemen.
Horseman.
They probably hate that, right? Yeah.
For two different
Sorry,
animals.
sorry. They're ribeye sandwiches.
Yes.
It's stuck in my head. That would always be something that would be useful to the township. I know that when we were looking through, prior to the last levy that we attempted to put through, the median age in Perry Township is in the 60s. We have an older demographic here. What do they have? If there was an area that they could come and socialize safely and everything else, would that be of value to the community? Possibly. But a large number of those are old farmers too, and I don't know if that would be something that they would want, but it's possible, right? And it's a place to meet with people that live in
Right.
various areas to get together.
I just have birthday parties.
Well,
I mean, we had one in Lewisburg.
and ultimately, I mean, the township is about the residents, right? And I think it's been a very long time since anyone truly point blank asked the residents, what do you want? What we've always been kind of forced in my short time in the township, I'm not a lifer. It's been more reactionary. Something happened, we have to react. You know, we had tornadoes, we had to react. But in that time, the reaction and outpouring by the residents was amazing.
Yes. Yes.
People, regardless of how they disliked their neighbors,
Yep.
didn't like what they were doing with their property, whatever else, they came together. And that showed me that, look, if there was some place where the residents could actually just get together without a tornado.
Yeah.
That would have some value. And I think that's what Sergeant Hessler put in his mock-up he called it a meeting center, right? Because you could do meetings there, you could do, it could be a social area. It had like a little coffee break area off to the side where people could do K-cups or coffee, whatever. I mean, something like that has low overhead. And especially if you've got the police in the same building, it's safe, right? You know, does that provide value to the community? I think it's very possible, but I can't give it a binary yes or no, right? So, and the only reason that I had talked previously about maintenance, police, and administrative offices in one building is because moving forward, that's easier to plan for, that's easier to sustain, that's easier to manage, right?
It's saying at some point, we're going to have to, 20 years from now, the township's going to have to tear down that maintenance building and build a new one. How long?
Or part of it, or, I mean, you know, it could be anything, but to me, that's part of this conversation is what is the 5-year plan? What is the 10-year plan, the 20-year plan, the 30-year plan? Because I'll tell you right now that if we were to build a new building, it doesn't have to go to a levy. Okay, we could literally go through USDA, get a 30-year fixed, basically mortgage to build a new building out there on the land that we have at edge of Piermont, right?
I think you could see that the cost of this building and maintenance over the next few years would almost, I don't want to say cover the cost, take a huge portion of that cost.
What it does is it allows you to reposture from reactionary to an ability to plan and execute. I won't lie, we don't have a lot of people that come to our meetings, right? And
We will when we decide to tear it down.
But part of it, I'll tell you, is during the winter months. You sit by one window, you sit by the other window. The air that comes through these windows,
And they're newer windows.
they are newer windows. There are things that happen day to day with this building is surely because of the bones of this building. This is a secure building. It's upright, but leaks like a sieve.
Mhm.
It's got problems. And at some point, it doesn't have to be this year, next year, whatever. But you have to start saying, look, this is our plan. This is what we're going to look to do in the next 5 years, next 10 years, 20 years. First thing of doing a USDA loan, which I looked into last year, is you have to do a site survey and you have to have the EPA come out, right? They have to evaluate the property as well as do a full site survey of the property. USDA requires that as part of their assessment on the loan that you can get, because they have different categories of loans, but they're all basically 30-year fixed low interest rate. So that being said, originally Chief and Sergeant Hustler had looked at what it would look like to build on this property.
Mhm.
Well, because first they'd have to move the leach fields,
And that would make,
then
this
build on
building-
the current leach fields,
that would make this building,
and then tear down this building once everything else was built.
But at the same time, leaving this building uninhabitable because it's not got an effective leach field.
Well, and that's the thing is that, it's, it wasn't a fully baked plan, but they were trying to figure out because it is centrally located.
Mhm.
But if you look at the property on the edge of Piermont,
Mhm.
it would affect probably reaction times east of there, Yes, east of there, but not to such a point that it would be a problem, because if they had the facility and we were able to continue to grow our force to what's needed for the township, not just what we can currently keep employed within a small space,
Mhm.
then more officers equals faster response. It mitigates the response time issues of location. So that's what I wanted to kind of get into with that, is that we've got 2 levies that we have to deal with already.
Mhm.
But if a percentage of the police levy would be for the future contribution to that kind of an effort, that makes sense, because a lot of that could be done with here. And an example of that would be, what would happen if the police actually had to get a Cormac? Like an office, I don't know, I shouldn't say Cormac. So the hardened trailers that they drop, like FEMA drops and everything else. Let's say the police force got 2 of those and put them out here. And the cost to sustain those was year to year was the equivalent of what they would pay towards their part of a new building. Right. That is a finite extension of their capability. And when it's gone, the money's still there to be able to be used annually towards that infrastructure. That's an example I thought of. Now, does it make a lot of sense? Not really. Not here, because we'd have to run power there, we'd have to run
Well,
there.
and then that could lead potentially to other issues because they would have to connect into the leach system.
Well, and it wouldn't be that, it would just be a workspace. I mean,
Just
they
a
would still come in
workspace.
here and use the bathrooms and everything else.
Okay.
I'll be honest, I don't believe our bathrooms are ADA compliant. That's another issue.
Says they are. There's a handicap sign on that.
Oh, it does, but I don't think the doors are wide enough for someone to get in. But that's an example is, there's ways to extend like their workspace without
Right.
buying a building or doing something in the next year or 2 that's going to be more of a knee-jerk reaction. I think we start planning now. And I know some of the other townships have what they call vision statements, right? They also have multi-year plans. And they evolve, they change based on the needs of the township.
It makes budgeting a lot easier too.
It does, because you know what you're working towards and what's going to be coming when, right? I think that's what we need to start looking at now as part of this.
Now is the cheapest time to build it. Even though that's kind of a funny statement at the moment. 2 years ago was the cheapest time to build it. 5 years ago was the cheapest time
Right.
to build it. The longer we kick this can down the road,
Right.
it's going to cost more the longer we wait to do it.
Well, and there's some
If
expenses,
there's a need, if we need to do it.
there's some expenses that we can offset with some of the American Rescue Plan funds
Right.
to start that
And that's
process.
why I didn't want to jump fully into the out year planning for the
Mhm.
township or the future needs. But this is where those two come together, is if there was the ability to do something that would provide a semi-temporary office space.
So, well, plus we could look at, the engineering and stuff,
Surveying.
the surveying, a lot of
Right.
that stuff.
Well, and we'd have to find a company too, because that falls outside of what like a Kramer and Kramer does, right? Now, you've been to the OTA a few different times. You know how they put the people that actually do the surveys, the buildings and everything else right next to the USDA people. If you've ever seen them in the convention center.
Yeah, but then
They line them all up. So you can literally go from the USDA to here, to here, to here, to here.
until they start overlapping
Right.
the time periods.
Well, yeah. So I think that's something that we don't even know if the property out at the edge of Piermont is viable for a new building. It may not be. I mean, does it retain water? Does it have drainage issues? That would have to be addressed as part of a building, but that's also comes out during the site survey and
Right.
other assessments. So I think that's probably what we should be looking at is, I'm gonna jump backwards here a little bit. So if probably need to get some pricing on the site survey cost, as well as the other assessments that have to be done for a USDA loan. And they're good to have anyhow, because we should have more intimate knowledge of that property than we have right now.
And is that something that we can reach out to USDA for their guidance and who to look at to have come out to do that? Because I'm sure that they have certain
Yeah,
ones that
so-
have to meet certain criteria.
There's a regional office in Dayton that I dealt with about a year ago. I'll dig up the emails and reignite that conversation. And what we can do is, if trustee Music wants to start digging into that a little bit. I want to make sure that we're balanced across the different stuff that we're doing, and I don't want to have my bucket overflow and have his bucket.
Pretty empty right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find stuff to do.
So what I'll do is I'll dig up that email thread. I'll send it to Charity, send to trustee Music. And we can start having those conversations and finding people that can do that work for us. And we do have the funds currently. I mean, the ARPA funds alone is sufficient for being able to plan for.
At least getting that process
Right.
started.
And then we can, once we're done with that, or while that's going on, we could talk with the police about if we needed a stopgap. What kind of, I call them Cormax, but they're the hardened containers that you
Yeah.
can work out of.
They're essentially a trailer.
It is, but I mean, it's meant, they drop it off a trailer. It's meant to be
Right.
self-sustaining.
Correct.
What kind of stopgap activities could we do to give the police the room that they need? Let's say, for example, that the current police area gets redesigned a bit to be evidence.
Now, here's an area where you're
Right.
spending money. This is kind of goes back to the maintenance garage where how much money are we putting into this building to get there when
And
we're
what-
gonna move? Do we
and-
really want to do that?
And well, because what I'm saying is that you're gonna need that stopgap, right? And if it's an issue with, I mean, the evidence place that they have now, they went in, they built it according to the secure specs. They walled off an area, put a secure lock on it, and that's what they had. So it's not a major,
With a
you're
fan.
talking about like a reframing of that small area back there to be able to handle evidence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an effort, it's not a huge effort, but does it allow you to move forward and transform as you go?
Have you been in that evidence room?
I have not been in it, I have seen it,
I'd like to go in it just to see, just so I can get an idea of what it looks like.
right? You can talk to chief about that, but also I don't know how.
I don't need to go in.
Right.
Well,
I just want to see kind of what the size we're talking about.
Ashley is actually the one that would
Yeah,
take them out.
she's the evidence curator.
Because she's the one, if I have to go out to get into anything, Ashley has to take me because chief doesn't even have access into that room.
Right,
I mean, I've seen the door.
right.
I just want to get an idea of what kind of size we're talking about. I know that the building's long, how much of that building? What all do we have there?
Right.
So, just so I have an idea what it looks like.
I think that's fair. We can check with Ashley on that and see.
Well, and another option with the trustees' approval is, yes, I have my office here. I come in daily during the week. Some days like Mondays, currently I'm here all day. There can be modifications made where if the police need to use that office, I can move some of my stuff. I mean, a lot of physical officers work out of their homes.
Right,
So, I mean, I would still come in, but I can limit the foot space that I require. We can move stuff around. Maybe Karen and I can work where if there's files that have to be maintained in a secured area, they could be, maybe we can share a little bit of room in her area.
right. And that's my point is we need to start having the conversations now to define the realm of the possible, to figure out what makes sense and what's just, no, that's a waste of time, waste of money, doesn't make sense.
I don't know if I really like the idea of the trailers. Because I don't know.
No, I know. It was an example of if there's a stopgap to give them space.
Right.
While working towards.
Well, and what Jason's talking about too isn't what you, and I know where you're coming from, Missy. I think you're thinking like the trailers that they bring in, the job trailers. What he's saying is a little bit more secure. They're not on wheels.
Yeah, that's, no.
But it's just kind of
I'm just thinking to myself, why spend the money on these trailers when right now they're so capable of working here? We still have an evidence room over there.
right.
Why spend that money each month or however on a trailer just so they can go out to the trailer to set? They can still sit back there.
So the only key is that we don't, and this is, I'm just gonna echo what the police department has said. There's a couple of things that are gonna be taking place here in the near future
Yes,
that is gonna make our police force more competitive in the area. And once that happens, then we will have the ability to have more officers. If we have more officers, we don't have the space for the officers.
Right.
So my point was that as transitional planning,
yeah,
if we needed more space, what could we do
get it.
to
Oh,
get
no,
more
yes.
space while working
We're doing-
towards a more
yeah.
permanent solution? And that's all.
Right.
It's, the only reason I thought about that was because having the evidence closer to the police force
Oh, yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
But it was just an example.
Yeah.
It's not something that we would have to do.
No, I see what you're saying. And I see what they're saying, and I know it does get cramped, but when they're not all here at the same time. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. But if the police force had the shift that they feel they need
Yes.
to
and the community
properly
wants.
be out in the township
Yeah.
while being able to
Right.
react, then that really kind of cramps them into that space.
Yeah.
And, this is something that I've just sat and thought about, and there is no answer.
Oh, no,
But this is literally something that,
like you said.
you had to
something
plan
else.
towards the end
Right.
point, but then figure out how you go from where you are to how you're
there.
gonna get there. And there may need to be some
We go.
interim, small term
Yes,
solutions along the way to make sure that you get there.
Yeah.
So so this is more stuff for us to dig into. I know the stuff with the police force is evolving.
right.
As they figure out what they need to have that force, maintain that force. And the space is gonna be the first thing that kind of smacks them in the face is they get more officers. And they don't get more space. That gets kind of hard unless you have officers stay in their vehicles, which as we get more officers, guess what? We're gonna need more vehicles. More vehicles, less parking space. I mean, it's one of those things that you can start to see as the township gets closer to where it needs to be to have the police force that it requires. The amount of space both inside and outside this building that's required for that, it just dwindles. I mean, there's literally, if we had all the police cars out here let's say we had to add 2 more cars. How much space does that end up
Exactly.
taking, you know, and so this is the part of the conversation that I wanted to have is, you know, we need to start doing,
A, B, and C.
right, so I call it spiral planning, where you start here and you just kind of start working out of, if we do this, that means this, and this has to happen. And once those happen, those have to be able to get from there to here. How do we do that? Well, what is involved there? Because then you start talking about time, money, resources. And also who you need to do the work for you, because there's nothing with this that we would physically do ourselves. There's nothing with this that Caleb would do, right? So that's the part of the plan that we have to get to. And as Fiscal Officer Brill said so eloquently, the ARP funds could help us seed some of that path so that while we are taking the time, we're not necessarily taking
Tax
money
dollars.
out of our current
Right.
tax allocation to get the ball rolling.
Right, and I like that because in that way, we'll know if we can even build there, you know,
Right.
so.
Do we have a survey of the property at all? Do we know
Do we what?
a property line, or is it the entire all the way to the corner?
Plat.
I don't know how far back behind it.
To the fence back there.
Fence, okay. Oh, I guess while we're on out there, talk a lot about police, a lot about this building, that building, the maintenance equipment that we got. We talked about a dump truck. I think Caleb was here. We could ask him these questions. What exactly are your main needs as far as a dump truck is? Do we need a dump truck? Do we just need a larger pickup truck? Me and him have had those conversations on, he's got an idea moving forward on what the township needs as far as equipment. And I've asked him to make us a plan of all the equipment that he's got. There's certain equipment out there that we absolutely do not need.
Like what?
Don't use the little tractor. It's got the forks on the front. It's just a long, it's just a tractor, small tractor. He said, we really don't use it for a lot. We can't pick up our oil with it. We can't put stuff up on her. It's only got a certain amount of weight limit.
I think that's what Mike was
Like the
using to
Traco?
stack stuff on those shelvings that he had back there that
Little John Deere.
Caleb took out.
So
Yeah,
that piece of equipment, absolutely don't. There's equipment, backhoe, where,
That's not going anywhere.
well, so, for projects that you need for 10% of the time, we could use another piece of equipment that we could use for 90% of the time. And if we do need that one piece of equipment, we can go rent it for that one time a year we might need it.
But you're talking in the winters, you're digging graves.
Yeah.
And like Caleb dug graves this year and,
I went out this last week and watched them dig graves.
okay, but he, when the ground was frozen, he took the traco out.
Mhm.
So the traco, he has to load it up, take it over there. And when he started digging, it doesn't have enough power. So they had to go rent a torch to torch the ground.
Right.
Then they could dig it. If you
So-
take the backhoe, which you can drive over there,
We had that discussion as far as making ground warmers.
well, then you put the legs down on the Bobcat. So not on the Bobcat, but on the
Track.
track, no.
Backhoe.
Backhoe.
Oh, thank you.
I do the same
Put the
thing.
stabilizer down and then you can dig.
Yeah.
And they also load their salt with it and everything else. So I don't see that piece going anywhere.
I think it could be swapped out for other pieces of equipment.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's kind of up to our maintenance supervisor to say, here are the main pieces of equipment that we feel would be the most benefit for the township moving forward. And I kind of have to take his word because he knows what he's
does.
and what's the main needs of the township as far as digging, moving dirt, moving salt, all of those things combined. I just don't want to I don't want to keep something because, well, it really, really does a good job for that one thing.
Which I can understand, but also, like you said, then we can go out and rent it or we'll just get rid. That's already paid for.
It is.
That's like $150,000 piece of equipment.
That we could sell and buy even a couple more pieces of equipment that we can do a whole lot more with than just that one piece.
I don't agree with you, but
And
That's why we're through first board.
so here's what I'll tell you is that, while Caleb, I understand taking his word,
Mhm.
but his word is still a little green.
Sure.
He hasn't been in this space for very long. He's learning as he goes. He's been evaluating the equipment that we had since the day he was hired. That was one of the first things we gave him, was to go out and assess what we have. And if we don't need it, let's get rid of it and figure out what we do need moving forward. The problem that we have is that I think with funerals specifically, we don't dictate the schedule on a funeral. And if we don't have a piece of equipment that could be needed, even if it's a high percentage of chance of need, and we can't facilitate a funeral,
That's our main job.
there's a problem. A
Taking
big
care of the
problem.
roads and cemeteries,
So,
right?
so the key is there's a difference in maintaining an asset and eliminating that asset and trying to make do with other stuff. I think at this point in time, we're probably, we have to be very careful about what we buy and what we don't buy.
Yes.
We do not have an endless amount of money. And the current rate of rental on a device with that kind of power
Sure.
is much higher.
Well, if we're gonna rent it 10 times over the course of a winter, well, that doesn't make sense at all, right?
Right.
So.
And that's
I
why,
get that.
but here's the thing is that you can't think of one winter. You have to think of multiple winters. And you have to understand also that when they did the project out on Sheep Road
Yes.
and other road projects, they do use those pieces of equipment. So
I think that's
taking a
fine.
full assessment of what it is this township requires is a much broader conversation.
Sure.
Than going in there and saying, well, we could just get rid of this and we could do fine with something else. We do have a couple of people that have worked in this township, and I'm not gonna, I mean, your significant other
Yes.
has decades
Sure.
of work here. And he's been very free with
Yeah.
letting anybody know what it takes to do a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So has a number of other people that have been here either in a more transitory.
I think you could also make the argument there that over the course of time, equipment has evolved to the point that we may not need that equipment that was used 20 years ago because that was the best thing we had at the time. And today, 20 years later, we have this piece of equipment that encompasses this realm that we
Right.
can do, so
But-
there is the advances there.
There is, but can we pay for those advances? Because chances
That's my
are,
point is
for the amount, the size, the capability
show me
that we have,
where we can.
I'm not opposed to the conversation. I don't think that's what
Well,
anybody's
That's all I'm doing.
saying.
That's all I'm bringing up.
What I'm saying is
Because I know it's
that
coming.
there is. This conversation is a part of an effort that we gave Caleb charge of when he was hired.
Right.
And that was assess the full capabilities
Mhm.
of your department.
Mhm.
Let us know what's too old, what can't be fixed, what can be fixed, how long it'll last, so that we can start working on a multi-year plan, once again, to be able to plan for purchases. We, right now, are having issues with stuff that's probably being bought as more of a reaction
Mhm.
that isn't necessary. And that's, between the ARPA funds, the tax funds, cemetery funds, the road funds that are coming into this township. We don't have to be hyper frugal, but we do have to apply a lot of critical thinking to anything that we're gonna buy that's going to be needed because if we buy something, chances are it's gonna have to last for 15 years,
Well,
20
and it's
years.
like the mower, like the cemetery mower. We definitely need a new cemetery mower. That would be a priority for me. I don't know if Caleb's saying anything to you, because they fix it every year. I mean, it breaks down every year. And it's got to be,
And that's for the cemeteries that aren't part of the current contract, right? We have
yes,
There's 8 others. We
8 of them. I think there's like
Yeah.
eight cemeteries, something like that.
yeah. Those are the ones we take care of. That's what that mower's for.
So there's, I think what you're bringing up is valid,
I'm just.
but it's
We're
also,
talking
but it's
about
also
the
part,
Oh, yeah.
Conversation.
it's
today as a
also
whole,
part of
so.
something that's already underway. So, I mean, we had asked Caleb to do this when he was hired because between the amount of tools that the previous superintendent had.
Mhm.
There were his own tools that were there and he took them back.
Yes.
We had no idea what we needed to have, what we didn't have, what we needed to buy, because all of that has to go through the fiscal.
Well, he hasn't even been here a year.
He hasn't.
So this is his
And-
first winter, correct? So first winter even digging through,
Yes,
so his opinion may change come.
Right.
That we may need something different.
well, I mean, it's like he bought a new weed whacker. Well, the weed whacker that we had was from 1974. So, yeah.
That thing works great. There's no reason to get rid of it.
So it's, I don't know.
Okay. I just wanted to bring it up in the.
So
Oh,
some,
yes,
so
yes.
there again, the stuff that Caleb is going through out of the roads, maintenance and cemetery departments. We will likely have to take a chunk of the ARPA funds and put it over there. You know, whether that, if that's like 20% of the second tranche, right? 30% of the second tranche. We can earmark that and that can always change. It's just a notional number to kind of cordon off that money, but it helps us plan for how we're going to use the second tranche. So
Because he does need a lot of tools, you know.
he does, and right now, just by we don't have a lot of funds coming in through the
No.
cemeteries.
Exactly.
We're upside down on the cemeteries, actually.
So we talk about cemeteries for a second.
Sure.
Is there any area, just an idea, I don't know if it's feasible or not, a mausoleum? A mausoleum takes a square footage and multiplies it by 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, up that you go. That would increase obviously the dollars per square foot that you get at a cemetery. I know we really don't have any space anywhere other than maybe Piermont, and I don't know what's sold there.
Well,
And then anything over across at Pleasant Hill.
you know, we were talking at one time, talking to Sycamore to see if they would donate some land to us.
Yeah, up there behind Pleasant Hill.
Right.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's something that we talked about last year. And a little bit the year before was the cemeteries have a finite amount of space.
Mhm.
And once you stop selling those plots because the cemetery is full, there's no new money coming in to maintain those cemeteries. And part of our responsibility as a township is providing those services.
Mhm.
So that's something else that would fall into a 5-year, 10-year plan is as land becomes available in the township.
Right.
Is that something that we put some funds aside for in some kind of I don't know what we've done with others. So we put it in like bills or a CD or something along those lines, but we put money aside to be able to purchase some land to turn it into a cemetery.
Right.
I did some research last week, 2 weeks ago on cemetery costs, opening and closing, all of that. Where we may be kind of on the same par level as other cemeteries, we're a little low. And the price of everything else has gone up. Payer's gone up, gas has gone up. I think it's something else we need to look at as far as raising the prices of those cemetery fees, plot fees.
Closing.
Because let's face it, $700 is, I bet if we broke it down, did the math, with the number of times we go back and forth to one single grave, I bet we lose money per grave. Forget about future maintenance, forget about future mowings. I bet we lose money on everyone. Or closely break even.
So, and it's,
If we break that down per dollar.
it's a fine line.
3 guys out there
Because-
for a grave.
Here's the thing that I've looked at over the last couple of years is that while it is low, it is commensurate with the townships around us.
Sure.
And that's the rub is because.
Why are we trying to compete? You're trying to sell something that's not profitable, doesn't make any money.
I
we have to
understand, but
maintain
you all,
forever.
so,
So I don't care really.
so what happened, the problem is that for people who live in the immediate Brookville area,
Mhm.
they can go to Jackson, they can go to Clay, they can go to Perry. If the cost, and let's be realistic about.
I'm thinking as a
the
business.
annual income
Right.
in the area,
Yeah.
right? The average funeral usually runs about $12,000. So when they're looking at where they want to bury someone, if it's a difference of a couple $100, that may make or break that family's decision. I think we've all been there when it comes to looking at cemeteries and plots for loved ones. So I know about 2 years ago, we asked the question, and I went out and looked at what Clay was charging, and we were pretty close to what Clay and Jefferson.
They changed theirs in 2020.
They did, and we looked at it again last, so every year, the cemetery services costs are adjusted based on cost of living, based on surrounding areas. I think right now, the key thing is with the impact of the supply chain and the cost continuing to go up beyond the standard 3%, it does kind of create a bubble.
Yep.
Right now. And we are probably within that window to make an adjustment this year. But if we price ourselves out of the surrounding areas,
So
we lose that business. And even if it's upside down, and this is where we're at. This is not something where we can make a profit on it, or we control the narrative of people coming here to Perry to buy a
Well,
plot.
if we're gonna say that the cost of a grave, a portion of that grave cost goes towards future maintenance of that cemetery. Mowing, sure, right. I don't think we're there. I don't think we've got it. I think that it's just not there.
I forget what it said. What was it? How many? 25, 30? We have to have that many funerals a year?
Yeah,
To maintain,
To-
to cover the cost.
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, I mean, with the price of everything going up,
Things are changing too, because some people aren't being buried, they're being cremated. So
Yeah.
those costs aren't as much.
Right.
And that's another area. I mean, we're doing cremation burials, but we are kind of locked in based on the weather.
Right.
That can only be done during optimal conditions, right? So it's an area worth looking into, but I think the last time that I checked, and it's probably been at least 8 months, we were right there with the surrounding area. But if we want to get with Caleb and have him try to break down a typical winter burial versus a summer burial, and we can look at the numbers, but like I said, it's a high wire that we walk, because it's not something that we can very easily price ourselves out
Yes.
of providing that service, because it's a non-profit service. This is not something that
I'm just not interested in taking a loss on it. Which is
And-
already take a loss.
well, and part of that is that we only have so much space in our current cemeteries. And I will tell you, we do not have a single veterans area in any of our cemeteries. You know, there was something I was looking into a year ago of getting with the VFW, American Legion, and other organizations. They can donate up to, I think it's $35,000, according to the
To put a
ORC,
section.
to put up a veterans memorial in a cemetery. And I was like, that would be a really good thing to do if we were planning to do a new cemetery.
Yeah.
Create a veteran section in that cemetery. Have a donation made by one of the veterans organizations that we do a percentage match on to commission the creation of a veterans memorial. And there again, that's something that, people look for. It doesn't matter if you served 1 year in the military during time of war or were a career soldier. That's something that people's lives foundationally are affected by. And having a place that they can go to and be in a section where when their family comes to visit them, they're reminded of the service, the
Well, that's like,
risk that the person took. It's important.
it is. And when you're talking about that, because Dale was always getting phone calls, and I know Caleb's got a couple out there in Piermont, they have the names engraved, the veterans.
Right, the plates on the back of the,
Well, the big headstone by the flagpole.
oh,
It's
yeah,
got
yeah,
all the guys' names on it. Well, they've received a couple phone calls that they want their dad's name put on it.
right.
Well, we're having a hard time trying to find someone, because there's only like a couple guys that go to do
Right.
that. So something like that, you know, what you're talking about. And I know I helped with the VFW when they did the one up at the Golden Gate Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was interesting, you know, they sold the bricks and
Mhm.
Yep.
all that, so.
So, I mean, and that kind of falls back into another avenue of the planning
Yeah.
for the township is we are running out of space in the cemeteries. What does expanding Pleasant Hill look like? Because that's one of the few places that we can expand. What does trying to establish a new cemetery, you know, maybe one in the, I mean, you're kind of limited by what land becomes
yeah.
available. But if you look at the township, there's nothing in the southwest part of the township from a cemetery perspective anymore.
No.
Um,
Are there any families with farms that would want,
Donate.
would want their name to be on a cemetery by donating that land? You know,
and that's possible, but then we have to look at the legal ramifications of that. How do we actually go about that? Because I think with cemeteries, it can't be donated per se. It has to be sold at least at a certain cost.
Cost.
okay.
But that's something we would have to dig into and then you put something like that out, then yeah, that does make it a little easier. Because you can plan for that, say we'd have to look at the numbers for the current amount. I think we're averaging about 30
Yeah.
30 funerals a year.
Give or take.
Went up a little bit during COVID
Yeah.
in the first couple COVID years. But based on the plots that we have available, and part of this is the mapping that they're working with Oasis against the
Yeah.
current
So there's
cemetery allocations to be able to see what we have available.
there's a cost.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there is a cost and part of that is in the more efficient management of the records, which we're working on right now. Once we do that, and we can actually look and see how many we have, how many have been sold that are still undug. And can say, look, when we hit, I don't know, 2028, we're gonna have a hard time finding a grave for someone who comes in and wants to buy a grave. And part of that is making sure we have those numbers and understanding of what we currently have allocated and sold. And that kind of fast tracks how
Right.
quick we would need to do something. Because let's be honest, we live in a agricultural township.
Yes.
And agricultural land doesn't go up for sale very often. It stays in the family, it rarely gets broken apart or anything else. So
With that being said, though, I think we're seeing a lot of farmland that is getting sold. If you look around, there's a lot of development going on in other areas that was farmland. We're at a median age of 60 years old in the township.
right.
That means to me that over the next 15, 20 years, 10 to 20 years, we're going to see a younger demographic move in to the township.
But you have to remember some of these, a lot of them out here are that farmland preservation. So you could never,
Can't
ever,
do that on a lot of them, sure.
ever do that. Yeah.
But my point is I think
Yes.
we'll see a younger generation come in, or, you know.
Oh, you're seeing them come into Brookfield now.
Yes, that's just kind of what I'm saying is
Yeah.
we're seeing that growth close to us with an older demographic. I just see a younger demographic moving in if they're able to.
If they can find the houses, yeah.
Right.
Well, and you have to understand too, that a lot of places that's happening is getting sucked up and it's happening in the incorporated areas of our boundaries.
Mhm.
We're not going to see a dime of that money from Westbrook and
I
Hackathon.
know.
That's not going to hit us at all.
And it should.
But the multi-acre
Yes.
houses that are being built down on Hackathorn,
Yes.
north of Air Hill will, I mean,
And-
but they're
and that's
basically putting one house on 5 acres.
Unless Brookfield wants to come in and annex.
And they
Yes.
could do
And
that.
they can do that.
And that's not something that we can even
No,
we could slow it down, but we
no.
stopping an annexation by a municipality is very hard to do. Our best planning there would be to get out in front of it and look at what areas would be prime for JEDs
Mhm.
and try to set up a JED for that area. And that way we could increase the taxable income the township would make. Correct. Over a 10-year period. And understand at the end of 10 years, it's gone, but at least it's something. You're not just giving
Yeah.
something away.
Exactly.
I know German Township has been doing that with the new school that's being
Oh,
built
yeah.
down in Germantown and a number of things. They built a JED for that and it was their way of
Yep.
offsetting the future loss by ensuring that they got something in the near term. So, but that's part of, once again, planning, we've got these different areas. So, from a police perspective,
Yep.
you working with the police to figure out what makes sense, what the realm of the possible is. Looking at the cemeteries, looking at the roads. Another question from the roads perspective is, do we want to try to take over more roads? Is that a conversation that we can have with the
Yeah.
county and say, look, by the math, we wouldn't make a huge profit off taking over parts of some of the roads, but it would be enough to sustain our roads over the next
Yeah.
20, 30 years. But see, I don't know how possible that is. I don't know what the process
I don't
is for
either.
talking with the county about, taking something like Crawford's Top,
Mhm.
right? Just as an example, in negotiating with the county to take over that road.
Right,
But I understand that taking over that road includes
yes.
repaving, widening, maintenance, mowing,
Snow.
clearing, salting, brining. So, it's right now, the amount of roads that we cover. Can we expand that without taking a loss?
I know.
And that's probably one of the tough conversations we have to start having.
But we don't know though, because we don't have a plan moving forward, which roads need to be done.
And that's my point is that when I say figuring out the realm of the possible,
I think that's why this is so
it applies
important.
to every aspect of the township because let's say we just take on another road, one of the north-south roads. From a plowing perspective, will that mean we need another person?
I know.
From a mowing perspective, we need another person, but will that also give us the ability to do more than one project, providing in-kind labor with like OPWC project? There's different gives and takes with that while it may require another full-time person, it may require a newer vehicle. It may require updating the swing mower on the side of the one track. That's where we have to start kind of actually collecting the numbers, looking at the numbers and saying, look, over the next 10 years, these are the vehicles or the pieces of machinery that we currently have.
Yeah.
And this is where they're no longer, there's a line here for these 4 pieces of equipment where it no longer makes sense to continue to maintain them.
Right,
So we know that within a year of this line, we need to plan to buy something. Okay, so if we're gonna plan to buy something, what does that cost look like?
Right.
Well, if we're taking on more roads in the area, that's a possibility. What does that look like from the county perspective? What does that look like from the tax perspective, with the gas tax, with the
Right.
road tax, with the bridge tax? What does that mean resource-wise that we have to have in that department? So this is it's a snowball down the mountain scenario for each one of the departments throughout the township. And I
It
think
is something that's not been done, if ever.
And-
To make a plan going forward.
exactly, and
This is a monstrous
yes.
undertaking that we're trying to talk about today in a couple of hours.
well, no, this is the first conversation.
This is the first conversation.
In a
yes.
series of conversations
We're going to have a
because
lot more of these. to
Oh,
break
yeah.
down, I think individual bite-sized portions of this.
Yep.
To start tackling. I'm excited. I mean, I'm kind of giddy about just getting into this project.
Yeah.
Because it's something that hasn't happened here forever.
No.
So,
Just be able to talk to it and see maybe down the future, these are things,
so here's what I think, and we can always discuss this at a later time if it requires a motion or resolution. The way things are currently laid out, trustee Mears works with the police. I work with roads and cemeteries because they've been one.
Mhm.
I think for the sake of future planning, that needs to be split. So like I would take roads. Trustee Music would take cemeteries.
Mhm.
So that we would have a point person across those three to be able to work those. We also have Karen who oversees the cemeteries as well as the zoning and the trash and everything else. And what we need to do is we need to start exploring each one of those areas to see where can efficiencies be gained?
Mhm.
Where can efficiencies be, or where can losses be eliminated?
Right.
If it requires acquisition of equipment, land, resources,
You bring it to the table.
bring it to the table.
What you got?
And maybe this ends up becoming a conversation that we bring back monthly, just to a working session and start working through some of that, because then we won't need the all day
Right.
kind of discussion. We would have an agenda that would be developed out of what's coming to the table, bring stuff together, and it would allow us to plan for the next month.
Right.
And figure out what else we have to get until we get to a point where we're ready to make some initial moves. And part of that is going to then tie back to the ARPA funds. What stuff can we do that we can alleviate with the ARPA funds? I think currently with those funds, if we were to say 30%, notional number, 30% for future planning of the township, whether it's site surveys, advertisements, like if we're gonna put word out there, let's say that we want to look into
It's nearly $72,000.
30% of the second tranche, not of the total.
Total.
That's.
I just want to make sure we were clear.
Yes. But whether it's finding land, buying land, advertising that we're looking for land, working with other municipalities, establishing JEDs, whatever, but figuring out what we can use those funds for to help us
Yeah, we're
fix and
working.
plan for where we need to go, while at the same time coming up with what our plan is for
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a good mix here on how to start for the future planning, because we kind of straddled that line between the two topics. Is there anything else regarding the ARPA funds that we need to hash up so that later this afternoon we can put a bow on it and execute what we need to execute?
So what I will need to know, and we already pretty much have the idea as to what's going to be needed to cover the premium pays. What I need to know is what we have to put a price tag on there or an amount on there for improvement and upgrades to facilities. Because, you guys had already talked about covering where we did the upgrade for the electrical backup stuff, that stuff. I've got to have a resolution and appropriations put in place for me to be able to pay those bills.
You pulled those earlier, correct?
Which ones?
Those costs to put the electric here. I mean, we know what those were from the last meeting. Did you have a total? And as far as.
I can pull it from-
There at the maintenance building.
I can pull it from the minutes. This is what was just the art.
Right, so it was, I think the setup here was $1,200, and then there was a few other costs because they brought in the heating lamps in
Yeah.
case the power went
Yeah, I
out.
think it was like a total, was it $1,800?
It was about 18, right around there.
Yeah.
And the key is that we were good. We felt comfortable leaning forward into that and then dealing with the resolution once we figured out how we were gonna manage that
Right.
moving forward.
But as far as she needs a number, so we want to add what it would cost to put that same kind of electric accessibility at the main.
Or any other,
Well,
any other,
she's talking about
That as
more
a whole.
encompassing, like having a fund set aside.
Yes.
for
like
the additional
we have
costs that
those,
have-
plus are we going to cover cost of some of the mold issues and rebuilding
Right,
stuff at the
so-
maintenance garage out of that fund too?
Okay, so you want to kind of.
It's more than just that. It just gives us more room without having to
Each
call
time.
another special meeting to do another resolution.
So,
You need a dollar amount or a percentage amount? Obviously, they're both. It makes the math comes out, but
Right.
what do you want? A percentage or a dollar amount?
I would say probably a dollar amount and refer to it as a percentage.
Yes.
The key is, I think that the stuff that Caleb wanted to do out in the maintenance garage was gonna run about $9,000, between $9,000 and $10,000. So at like a 15% of the first tranche, that'd be about 17.
10% of the first tranche is 17,634.84.
Yeah. So currently, we've got. This is all down right. We put 10 for IT, 25 for salaries.
Mhm.
10 and 35,
10 and
25.
25, total 35.
And then
It's about 28% of the first tranche is what it will be needed to cover the premium pay.
Yeah, it's a little short.
so for 250 on both, it would
Yes.
be, what was the percentage?
It's like 47.5, or what is that, what I said? Hold on. Let me
That
pull
was 1,000 though, that wasn't the percentage, so that would be about 30
30
some percent.
76,
by,
about 27%.
27.
it's like 27.5, so
5, yeah.
28% would be sufficient.
And then what percentage would 40,000 be?
About 23%.
23%,
What was that for?
just notionally on a dump truck.
Okay,
That's what I was,
Is this for the truck?
yeah, for the
Okay,
dump
good.
truck. Yeah.
now, just to clarify that for myself. You said that comes out as 80, right? We've already done 50.
We've got 50.
That's not 130, right?
Mm-mm,
Okay,
no,
we would just,
we got the 50 and then give like 30,000 more.
Up to 40
Yeah.
is what we were talking about. And then
then why go with the 80? Then why do 23%? Why? make
that's
it-
the 40,000, the 40,000 out of the first tranche.
Oh, I thought you meant 80.
No.
Okay,
No,
okay. I hadn't done the math there.
so that said, that brings us out of the first tranche at 86%. I think that's comfortable. That gives us a 14% notional overhead.
Okay, so
The second tranche.
okay, so we have the 25% salaries,
Yep.
because are we factoring in there anywhere the improvement and upgrades? Because I know you went ahead to the dump truck, but we never gave a percentage.
So that's what I was getting to,
Okay,
was right. So if we looked at, another 10,000, that would probably push us up to 98%.
We got 24,600-ish left over,
So half of that would be about
12,500.
well, but we're already factoring in roughly 4,000 between the upgrade here and if we do the upgrade there. Plus if what he's wanting to build in there is 9 to 10.
Right, so that's what I was saying, is I was trying to get to a number which was about 15, higher side of 10%, so probably about 15% set aside for those.
Upgrades and
I guess it would have to be like 13%. 13% of that.
You said 13%.
Yeah,
That's 22,900.
so if we, that's probably about right, because at least half of that would have to go to the maintenance garage for both the work that Caleb wanted to do in the back with the mold, restructuring that, doing the mold completely. And then the backup power. and-
Accessibility.
And accessibility to the building. Yeah, because those doors are atrocious.
Yes,
There's one door that only you can open, right?
no, I can't get it open.
So 13%. That would put us at 99% of the first tranche allocated.
Not bad.
1% as wiggle room is pretty good. I mean, what do you think, Charity? Would we be better at 12% for that work? Because these are notional numbers. I mean, we're
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
operate within
Yes.
what we have, what we've received.
I'm still thinking honestly that right now, we could probably get by with just doing 10% on the improvement and upgrades. Because that, like I said, that gives us 17,634.
Right.
That's Caleb's 9. 1,800 here, that's 2, or 11,000,
Mhm.
Right.
plus his access and doors.
And
there's
then,
another couple
anything
thousand.
else that comes up, we would allocate for the second tranche,
Right.
right? That's fair. I think that's good. And then that gives us 4%
10% to IT.
notional wiggle room in the overall first tranche.
28 to salaries,
So 10,
And how much did we say to the truck?
23%,
23.
we'll just call that building.
10% to building. That's not working.
Building repairs. 10%, which brings us to 96%.
I'm missing something.
25 salary,
No, 28 salary.
No,
No.
ours is 25.
25, the first premium pays 28. The salary that was
That's-
previously set aside for management.
There's where I'm missing money.
Yeah.
It's 25 for salary.
Yep.
And
And we'll
28,
just instead of saying salary, just call that management of ARPA
ARPA
management.
management, okay. And then this is premium pay, 28%.
28% premium pay.
That's a 96% is what I got.
Yep, that's what I have.
So you got
So then this afternoon.
6.
I'll put
Won't be a
together,
problem to come up with a resolution that basically breaks out. Because you're gonna have to put the actual fund amounts. You can't operate from the percentages. of the
Correct.
resolution, Right, yeah.
correct.
But we can then vote on that
What,
resolution.
what I will do is I'll do like what we did for the original ones. We
Right.
do the resolution. We're gonna do the appropriations for the fund.
Uh,
And then, because it's still, these are still right now gonna be under the 2272 because we're not moving these funds into the general fund because they have a designated
Right,
thing. So then I'll just do what we did before. We have increased the fund and then split it out based on.
right.
And then what I have to do with that is then once we get the resolution passed, then I have to get with the UAN for the account codes,
Okay.
classifications and stuff.
$7,000. So we've got, each one of us has a swim lane for
Yep.
the future planning of the township.
I'm gonna reach out to the USDA on a site survey on Piermont.
I'll send you that information.
Okay, and then
Now, I do have one
leaning more on cemeteries.
request, and trustee Music brought this up, is I know we have the estimate that Caleb had gotten together about using wood for the framing and stuff for the offices, but you had mentioned the possibility of going to maybe steel, correct? For the framing inside.
No, that wasn't me.
I thought okay, it was Tina had mentioned something about sometimes those are more cost effective to go with steel versus the wood.
Right now, that may be the case. So
Yeah.
So is
Well,
that
and-
something that we can,
so We can talk to Caleb about that. Tell him, look at the most efficient way to do it without skimping on
Right.
quality. Because you don't want to have to put something together and then have to deal with it every year for the next
Yeah.
right?
5 years.
Well, not only that, but if it's more economical to do it that way, you've got less maintenance, you've got less, if we get a roof leak, that's not gonna be affected the same way as the wood's.
it's gonna take longer to rust it than it will rot it.
Yes.
So
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can have a look into that. All right. Is there anything else regarding these topics that like to discuss?
So I know that building a building is not gonna be popular to some people.
Right.
And to just say, well, the township's operated this way for this many years is not a good excuse. And I think that it would be irresponsible for us to continue to kick this can down the road for future trustees to say, take care of this problem. I
Right.
think we are in a good spot here financially, to a certain extent with the ARPA funds coming in, that this is the right direction for the
It is
township.
never a viable argument to say we've always done business this way.
It's the most dangerous phrase in the world. As far as
When you
I'm
look, in the last couple of years has shown us.
Yes.
Just how drastically this world can literally pivot on its axis and change everything about day-to-day life. We have to be able to plan for it. And one of our responsibilities as trustees and fiscal officers is to be fiscally responsible with the money that comes into this township from the taxpayers that live here.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to put good money after bad on a building that's been reused and reshaped so many times? It's not necessarily meant for how it's being used today, and it has issues.
Right.
We could continue to sustain that, but that's basically just pushing the tax dollars.
And it's putting Band-Aids on stuff. It's putting Band-Aids on bullet holes.
Exactly. So part of that, and this is the same issue we have with levies, is getting people to understand there are 4 core responsibilities of a township. And the fire and EMS, police services are part of that.
Yep.
The ability to efficiently leverage the tax monies that come into this office is one of them. Providing cemetery and funeral services is one of them. This is not something we have an option in.
No.
This is something that we are tasked with and we have to do, because if we don't do it, that's how townships dissolve.
If you're not growing, you're dying.
And in this day and age, we're at a place where if something was to happen to Perry Township, it would be the county. And how long does it take county to come out?
Yeah.
They're already stretched thin the way that they are, and they're
Yes.
not gonna get
No.
a lot
Oh.
more resources based on having to take over another area of responsibility.
We
So,
haven't talked about we didn't even talk about the levies. Want to
no,
bring that up?
okay.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that when you said getting the residents to understand.
Right.
My response is that there's a lot of responsibilities here.
Yes.
That we have, that we don't have the luxury of evaluating popularity.
Right.
It is what either the township does it or the township doesn't exist. It's a very clear line,
Mhm.
and it's happened to hundreds of townships across the state over the last 100 years.
Right.
And it'll continue to happen if it can't be done efficiently and it can't provide the services that are required. Then they'll go from dealing with a township to dealing with a county.
County.
Or, the county will basically let the pieces go
Yeah.
to the surrounding municipalities. And then you're dealing with Brookville and New Lebanon.
Right.
So either way, I mean, it's not as simple as what people like, what they don't like. Unfortunately, all we can do is inform them and let them know what happens if it isn't able to be done.
Well, and to build off of that, trustee Hartshorn, is I've heard a lot of people in the past say, well, we don't need a police department. What a lot of them don't understand is if something were to happen, we don't have the police department. We don't have any of this either, because this can't sustain without support too from the police department. We can't cover the electric bill, the telephone bill, the internet service bill for this building without the police department covering a portion of that. It's not manageable.
Yeah, people don't understand how much actually the current police funds make this township viable. And that's part of the reason why we needed a new police levy, is because the amount of funds that has to sustain is broader than what was actually planned for in that. So, I don't want to get sucked down that road, but because that's a whole nother avenue of discussion, but it does fall into future planning. Because let's be honest, we currently have a contract with the Surrounding Fire Department that's going to expire.
When we haven't met it.
Well, and it's going to expire. And do you think that if we don't have the money to pay them what they currently require to support us, that they're beholden to just provide us services. They're not.
They're not.
And that's where, once again, we have to plan for what we need to support and find ways to make that happen. So with that said, I will stop my rambling and make a motion to adjourn the working session for today.
I'll second that motion.
Trustee Music,
Yes.
trustee Hartshorn,
Yes,
trustee Mears.
Yes.
we'll be back at 3 p.m. for our special meeting.